At the time of this recording, there are 3 more episodes left of ANDOR Season 1 to come out next Tuesday. I am biting my nails waiting for it. I'm so excited. If Season 1 didn't solidify it, Season 2 did. It is my favorite show of all time. So good. Every aspect of the filmmaking is like 10 out of 10 to me. Today, we're gonna focus on the title sequence. So every episode, he uses like the same melody, the same like fanfare, I guess you could call it, and slightly alters it so that it foreshadows what's gonna be happening in that episode. So I thought, what if someone hired me to just score one episode's title sequence? And I decided to marry that idea with some of my like personal rehearsal time. Don't get me wrong, I think it's really important to have like unprovoked, open jam, like open creation as any type of artist, especially a musician. But I'm trying to make sure I grow in a linear fashion. We got to keep the lights on here. I have goals, I want to be able to score a film like ANDOR one day. So what I will do is I will give myself a time limit and a prompt, and I will try to create the thing, and then I'll go back and analyze it. Usually I'll bring a couple people in to give their opinions as well. But it kind of opens my eyes to what am I doing? What am I reaching for first when it comes to quick turnarounds? Where am I at in my creativity right now? Am I doing the same things over and over? Am I trying new things? What sticks out when it's go time? So I highly encourage other people to do the same thing. I'm gonna show you the one I made in the 30-minute window this morning, and then we're gonna go through my Logic session, Logic Pro, and kind of look at what I did and like criticize myself, give myself feedback. Sometimes I use the techniques that I preach like to a T, and then sometimes I totally forfeit that just for creativity. But my goal with a quick turnaround is like to find that middle ground so that it's a little bit organized so that I can go back and jump into it later. But it's also like a little bit of a beautiful mess so that I know that I'm really just trying to flex my creativity first and foremost. So let's take a look. Okay, so here's what I made in that 30-minute window. The prompt was to make the title sequence. I think what I made is a little bit longer. I wanted a longer build up and to try a few different things, but it's the same idea. I had to think in a little bit different of a way than I normally would with a standard deadline and a project with more parameters from a director or something. So as you can see, we're seeing a lot of this MIDI green here, which I normally like to commit things, bounce them in place, because that feels more real to me. When I'm committing to my ideas in real time, it forces me to re-record if I don't like what I did, which is a good thing, because when you're physically recording something and not just moving, the MIDI notes around, you're going to get more life in it. I'm trying to do more of that. If I'm using like a MIDI software instrument, I really try to make sure I can get the most real performance out of it as possible. So normally you would see a lot more committed tracks like this one where you just see the waveform. But in this situation, I wanted as much flexibility as possible if I wanted to change something, or if I wanted to come back and give a better treatment to this. That's not just the quick 30-minute thing. So as we get started, you can see I I wanted to do kind of like a little exposition style intro, so I just have this this flute here that plays. It's not the normal da na 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 melody. I wanted to lead into the main melody with a different point of interest before that we build up to. So I kind of like how it emerges out of this like low intro. Let's check out what I'm doing here. So I have like a bass, like low mid organ here that plays the chords. You get the idea. So I did this because it has that like poignant attack with like those clicks on the front end to make sure we are staying on tempo and that the melody is moving forward, because there's a lot of reverb and stuff on this. Like, again, let's take a look over to the left hand side here. Normally I would create buses with different reverbs so that I'm not, using my processing power incorrectly. Buses always help because you can route multiple things to the same verb. Sometimes it does just sound good to have a verb on your instrument. But in this case, I was just copying the same verbs over and over that I liked, and I wasn't really changing the parameters much. I would not recommend this if you are doing a more organized, legit project. But in this case, if I'm just trying to be creative and I can clean it up later, that's the move. So we've got this organ, and then on top of that organ, we've got this electric flute that's playing the lead line. The minor, and that's the main focus of this section. I want you to be listening to that flute, but I don't want it to feel like it's behind time just because of that reverb I have. These violins are fun. They definitely take up a lot of space in the mix. They add to like the busyness of this, which I think makes you feel busy. It's like, all right, there's going to be a lot going on in this episode, a lot of moving parts. And then to keep movement going, we have these strings. They don't sound super real because of that like sudden decay that they have, almost like this like slapback type thing or gated type thing. And then obviously our just some timpanis that help give some rhythm, some beat. So normally I would try to make the string sound more real if I'm just staying in the box like I did. I guess I should have mentioned that earlier or first is for this, I pretty much just had a keyboard and then a few of my favorite synths lined up. I wasn't going to pull out my guitar or any other instrument because I've only got 30 minutes. I'm going to rely on the software instruments that I know and love. Like, I really like the Casio CZ. It has a lot of good synth sounds as well as some realistic sounding like organs, and I can even get some cool string sounds out of it. Obviously, when you are using fake instruments, you want to compensate for the fakeness. I hate to use that because a lot of these instruments really do sound just as good as the real thing, but I do not like to conform or quantize unless the song calls for it or I really need to clean up my mistakes. I would rather do the performance 3, 4, 5 times and try to get the right take like a real instrument so that you get that imperfection of human touch, right? Like, I'm not going to touch all the keys just perfectly with the same velocity. I want to feel that. I want to feel my fingers in this like you would a musician, like if I had an ensemble. And you can see this by seeing my human touch here that I am not, I think I'm messing with something. My human touch here, what am I doing? I'm not in Logic as much as I used to be. Like all my little MIDI notes here are not starting at the same time, which is fine. unless it's noticeably bad, leave it like that. And when I loop, that makes it sound less loopy as well. Like, for example, these strings here, I think I slightly quantized these. They're not, they don't look super quantized. Maybe they do, actually. They look perfectly imperfect. Like, here's one right on the downbeat, but this one's a little bit before it. This one's even more before it. It just adds the human touch. So the strings, like you always want to mix like held notes with like a staccato, with a pizzicato. You want multiple things going on at once when you're trying to create a larger wall of sound. If I had everybody doing holds or everybody changing at the same time, that's just going to sound a little bit too on the nose of like simple. So a quick way to add interest is to have each of your parts that you lay out do something different. So I wouldn't record whole notes and then, a new synth, whole notes, a new synth, whole notes. I would make sure, okay, if I'm doing whole notes with my first instrument that I just created, my next instrument, I'm going to make a point not to do that. The next thing I create will be these moving strings that add movement. And then after that, maybe I'll throw in the timpani because I really want to get the hits in my head. And then finally, I can add these like little overlayers, like the bass that brings everything to life, or this side instrument. Again, I'm also panning as I go. I'm not sure if other composers are doing this or if they like to make sure they get a good mono sound first. I know when I'm mixing, I really like to make sure it sounds good in mono first, because if it doesn't sound good in mono, then the problem might be more with your arrangement than your mix. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. Either way, I tend to pan things just at least slightly so that I can get a wider like field of vision, essentially, with my ears. Using that stereo field makes me feel like I'm there with musicians, like I'm sitting in front of an orchestra or just a group of musicians, some sort of ensemble. So I don't get wrapped up in the fact that it's just me playing these things over and over. I don't want to feel like I am tending to do the same thing on each track because I'm me every time and I'm using the same slew of synths. So anything I can do on the front end to feel like this is a greater production than just myself with a computer, the best. Maybe some composers work differently than that, but for me, I try to get out of my own mind and into the mind of the project that I'm working on. And for me, that feels like something bigger than myself, multiple people working together to create a cool sound. So again, let's go back into these strings, these arpeggiating strings with the timpani with these electro violins. Check this. So what I really like about this section is that I try to make sure not to overplay the chord structure. I'm okay with some instruments holding, like it holds. I didn't play dum dum dum. I did not play that second chord in the structure with these strings on purpose because it's going to shine more in the melody or in another instrument doing that. Let's add this electro flute that's playing those. Obviously, the holding on that minor 6, or the minor 1, I guess if you're looking at it like that, holding on that minor 1 chord with this electro violin and then going to the next chord with the flute causes a level of tension that I can rely on to sound decent. I'm lucky because Nicholas Bertel composed this to begin with, so I already know what I'm going for in my head. So that dissonance plus the spread of the different instruments doing different things automatically brings this to life. Like, I don't have to work ultra hard to make sure that I'm keeping interest in mind. Check it again. So when you get to this note, everything does come together here because every one of the instruments does hit that note or does hit that chord together on the downbeat, and that kind of gives this resolve, this like mini resolve away from the dissonance that we have in the first half of the measure. Again, I usually like to have something in the low mid, like something with a little bit of meat playing those chords. Not all the time, but something that holds down the fort essentially, and that's what this organ is doing. It's, as you can see, it's mixed pretty low and it's to the left a little bit, so it's not going to be at the center of your attention, but it's there and it's making sure that all these pieces come together and agree upon something. So as I go on, I just add little notes of interest like this electric lead. So you can see so it doesn't sound too loopy because there is some looping going on here. I had 30 minutes. This lead here holds so that there's a seamless transition between this loop and the next loop. And that's, I think that's a pretty standard technique when it comes to making sure something doesn't sound loopy on the most simple level. What I want to highlight, though, is this electric lead and the electro vibe here. These are both melodic instruments that are playing this lead line here. Check this. So you hear this. This is subtle, but I have the electro vibe here panned to the left a bit and the electric lead panned to the right. I want to make sure that, again, I'm using that stereo field and all the tools in front of me to keep interest about. And these slight differences in sounds, they're not ultra different in the mix. Like they just sound like this like high lead line, this buzzy lead line. But it kind of moves, right? Like it's moving from left to right in my ears, even though I'm not thinking about that with the greater mix. But check it out with everything. This type of music, you want a little bit of the element of surprise. You want that feeling of awe. This is Star Wars, right? Like, it's one of the coolest things on earth. It needs to feel that way. So we need to use every tool at our disposal to make this feel like a wall of sound that isn't too heavy in one section but isn't too light in another. Everything comes together to create a fun score that keeps you guessing, right? So Sting, actually, of all people, I've seen some interviews with him where he likes to use the element of surprise in his songs, which is when he's changing keys, from verse to chorus, or when he's, his melody will go to a note sometimes that you didn't expect, like in this, in subtle ways. There will just always be some level of surprising interest to the Police and his own music. And I always try to keep that in mind. And I think Nicholas Britell does this in an awesome, subtle way, where at the end here, I know I didn't bounce everything, so I have to start before the measure if I want this to play. So it starts to grow. I love this part that he adds. Sometimes in the different title sequences, he'll go to that section earlier first or last, usually. And it's a slight key change or a modal change that just, it's kind of his come down from the melody in this different key. And I love that. That's that element of surprise, that shift of feeling. It's like, okay, now the title sequence is over and we're shifting into the next part of the next section of the story that you get to hear this week. I think that's amazing. I think that's what brings scores to life. Just using, like, Tetrising all of your techniques that you have available in front of you together, along with the different instruments you can use. Now, let's move on to, I don't think I need to dwell too much on everything that I did because, again, this was a quick project, but something that I'm noticing is I probably didn't use enough different sounds, right? Like, I try to add movement by, adding reverbs, and let's find a good one. Here's a good one. This subtle movement added in the background of electro keys is nice. Like, that sound alone without these effects I added sounds like this. And at first listen, that doesn't sound ultra different, but I added this space modulator on here. It's essentially like a mixture of like chorus and phaser and a few other effects that work together to just add a little bit of movement and rotation. It adds a different type of attack. Here, turn it off. Check this. Instead of you get it's little things like that even if it's sitting in the back of your mix, it's creating this movement, and movement is good. I've used that same word, and I've used interest a lot in this, but that's just it. Is you want to, especially with a title sequence versus underscore, you want people, every note, to be ready for the next note. You want people to be anticipating the next note. And I have like this verb after the space modulator. Again, like, you want to have a normal effects chain when it comes to things like vocals or maybe even a guitar or something. But when it comes to shaping a sound, I want it to sound otherworldly. So I'm not just going to put my reverbs last because that's what you're supposed to do. I'm going to have this space modulator going into a reverb that then goes into saturation. So I want the saturation just to affect that stuff. And then once it's already saturated, I want to add this slight tremolo that just adds more of that subtle movement. And then finally, I'm going to clean everything up with an EQ. And I probably could have compressed this more, but things like compression aren't really what I'm going to focus on with a quick turnaround. I would focus that in on like a greater mix later to glue everything together. Right now, I'm just trusting myself as a musician to compress, right? It's like how a singer, when they get louder, they can back up from the mic, or they can, sing louder if they're, purposely backed up from the mic. They can kind of compress themselves. Like a good singer can do that on stage. I try to do that as a musician when I'm recording. It's like, be conscious of what I'm doing and how this piece I'm recording serves the greater mix. So let's listen to that again with all the effects back on. So this is probably the sound, the patch that I've created for this. I created it quickly, but that I enjoyed the most. Like, I think it's the most interesting. I'm not saying there aren't other interesting ones in here that I'm happy with, but this is the only one. If this were like a longer project that I was working on for a week, I would probably keep this closer to what it is, whereas the other ones would probably be very different by the end if I were doing a final mix or a longer composition section. This is more what I want to see. If I'm recording MIDI, I want to bring it to life using my fingers, using effects, and then like keeping the movement and the rotation that you can hear in the background. Like, here's one that maybe doesn't have that. It's just the sound that I dialed in from the CZ, sorry. It's just this preset, and then I think I changed a couple things about it. It's kind of like this fluty thing that I added reverb to, and a little bit of EQ to bring out the parts of it that I want. I wanted to hide a little bit of the bad buzz up here. It's simple. Like, that's not I would do way more to get that sound how I want it if I were doing a longer project. But for this, it's fine. The reverb is doing a lot of the work. It's kind of adding to the mess. Reverb is awesome because anytime there's going to be reverb, echo, delay, it's going to add saturation, like inherently, because when you have one sound holding while a new chord comes in, those are going to work together and create harmonics up in the air, essentially up in the EQ spectrum that wouldn't be there if you didn't have the reverb, or the ones that are there are more pronounced. So reverb is always a great way to like add to a sound if you need to be simple. But also, like, who doesn't love the sound of reverbs and delays and stuff? I mean, with this type of music, you need it. You want it to feel like it's a bigger than itself. So let's talk about basses for a second. So I really went simple on the bass with this, because with all these layers, there's going to be a decent amount of bass, because it's all like software synths for the most part. And those are going to be pretty bassy inherently, because you're getting the full range straight out of the software instrument. The bass I was subtle with. Check this. Boom. It's just holding down the note. And then this bass comes in. I just have the CZ with a patch that I like. And then I added an ARP to it that just is acting more like a sequencer. And then I'm back to this bass at the end as we're kind of fading out. I wanted to do like this like driving thing, so I finally do the 4 on the floor with a timpani. I would mix this differently if I were doing a full mix sessions, so they're not competing as much. It's okay. And, and mind you, we are listening to this with ozone on. I just kind of did a, slap an ozone on it, and then, edit a few of the parameters after you can do like this listen. There's a feature in ozone that I'm sure you're all aware of where you can just use this assistant that listens and then recommends what you could do. I guess I was a little bass heavy because I didn't do the mix, and then they wanted some more highs because it maybe wasn't pronounced, because I like to be frugal with my highs in my on my tracks, so usually they tell me to bring them back. I just changed a couple of the small parameters on here, added a limiter the way that I want to. I let this thing soar. It's pretty loud. I think it goes to like -12 integrated LUFS, which is pretty loud, right? Like I like to keep things below -14 and even quieter when I can at other points. I think I just think like a mix engineer a little too much when I'm creating. That's another note I have for myself, is like not to worry about that type of thing. Just create, make sure you're not clipping, and then mix later, arrange later. Just create something awesome that fits the scene. So yeah, it's a little muddy, but like the bass, I think, thanks to ozone, is kind of cleaned up because of this impact that cleans it up. The clarity brings out, like the forefront of like the 1 to 2K, and it like kind of, the low mids are always the problem, right? And then like the bass, getting the bass right. And they just pulled down my EQ. And for a project like this, that's good enough for me. So that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about. Is like what I'm going to do next time is I am going to make myself a template that has multiple synths ready to go. And I'm going to have a guitar ready to go. And I'm going to make sure that I force myself to say like 5 synth tracks max and 4 guitar tracks max. And then I have to have 3 layers of some sort of percussion. And maybe I can't use the same plugin twice. Or for the final result, I have to give myself 10 minutes at least of those 30 minutes just for mixing, and then making sure that I'm not using the same settings on plugins twice. Something like that, just to keep my creativity moving forward. I'm also going to say, like, I'm going to work even more on my arrangement. Like, I don't need every instrument to be playing cluster chords, right? Right? Like super tight chords. We all kind of fall into that because it's fun and it sounds cool. But like, give your instruments room, right? Like this It doesn't need to be playing as many of these notes because my other instruments are covering those notes. If you have too many instruments playing the same notes in the same voicings, you're just going to get like a less unique sound. If you want to create your own voice in your arrangements, do that by, my violins tend to do this. I've noticed, like, I guess in this arrangement, Nicholas Britell always has his, not always, usually has whatever's playing the lead line plays these two notes. Rather than just the one part of the lead line and have another instrument harmonize. It happens sometimes, but maybe I can find my way that I could have done that differently. Like maybe I could have only had instruments like in the lower register playing, like the low mid register playing that that melody, and then the higher instruments harmonize with the melody. Like that could have been my own spin. So always finding a way to put your own voice into anything is my biggest tip, is like finding your own voice through the box you put yourself in of time and of the prompt. Maybe I'll do another one. Like, what would I do if it was like a really sad episode? Maybe I'll do that next, and I'll try to implement some of these things together. And I'll try to say maybe no looping. You have to record everything. Like just hard no on looping. It may be small, but I have, some notes I'm going to throw up on screen that I'm going to consider next time I do a project like this. If you have a cool idea for a prompt or maybe just a different TV show you would want me to do this with, or questions, just put them down in the comments below, and make sure to like and subscribe and do all, the YouTube stuff. So until next time.